So today we're going to talk just a little bit about Jesus. So Jesus, from how I understand him, was primarily a Bhakti yogi, which is the yoga of love and devotion towards God and towards others, like what's known as the path of the heart. And he also had great wisdom, but what he really represented was like the path of love towards God and towards other human beings. And that's why his main teachings were like love your neighbor as yourself and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And he did do a lot of miracles, and that's what the Bible talks about a lot because it's easy. That's how people can explain that easily, is by miracles, like the stories of him. But the miracles aren't the most important aspect. The miracles are for people with little faith to get us to believe more and understand. But like the true miracle was the miracle of the love in the heart. So he talked a lot in parables, and a lot of times even he would have to explain them later to his disciples because they wouldn't understand. And he would say that he used parables so those that weren't open to his teaching wouldn't understand. Not that he didn't want them to, but he talked in parables so that only those who were ready to hear would be able to receive the teaching. So what I just wanted to talk about was this little verse in the book of Mark where Jesus says, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, meaning your own ego, your own attachments, your own who you think you are. Take up your cross and follow me, which means follow the way of the universe or live in harmony with it. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. So if you try to hang on to who you think you are, you'll never find this higher space or this higher consciousness. But if you give up your life, surrender for my sake and for the sake of the good news, the sake of the truth, you'll save it, which means finding yourself. And then he goes on to say, what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Is anything in the world worth more than your soul? So often, metaphorically and in reality, we are giving up our soul for the things that the world that we think can offer us, for who we think we are. So most of the time just think about all the roles that you're caught in all the time that you so strongly identify with, which is your attachments to your identity as somebody with a job or a parent or a child or a good person, or your role as someone that's trustworthy, or your role as somebody who parties or whatever. And it doesn't mean that those things can't go on, but you don't want to be we're really attached to them. So we're really caught up in that most of the time. And to find a higher truth and to find the reality of who we really are, like to find our soul, it can only be done through giving up my attachments and my opinions. Because that's what diseases me. Like in the third patriarch of Zen, it says to set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. And it goes on to say there's no need to seek for truth. Just cease being so attached to opinions. So understood this a little more. It doesn't mean that you have to follow Jesus specifically or whatever deity that you choose to follow, but what it means and what Jesus represents that people often misunderstand. Like when Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, nobody comes to the Father except through me. He doesn't mean the person of Jesus historically. He means through that consciousness. Nobody comes to oneness except through this higher consciousness, through this way of being, through this giving up of attachments, through this surrender to the way. So how can I practice in my everyday life following this way and giving up my own path? What it means is that I surrender a little bit to the best of my ability. I continue to surrender more and more to the flow of the universe, to the Tao, to the way things are. And I can develop awareness through whatever methods I use. I can get some awareness of my life situation to where I could function in all these roles and I could be a part of whatever I have to be a part of, my recovery community, my family, my jobs, my school, whatever. I could function in those roles, but rather than trying to impose my will, I'm functioning as an instrument of the Tao or an instrument of God. So I'm just doing, and it's easier that way and it's more peaceful and serene, because rather than my mind, my ego trying to push and struggle, because think of all the attachments you have. Like I said, it says to set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. Think about all of your attachments and aversions, all the preferences you have, all the things you like or you don't like, or the people you hate or you don't like, or your opinions for this or against this, or your ideas about how it should be. And that's where I stay away from God. That's where I stray from the one. When I'm always caught in my ideas of how it should be rather than sitting and being with what is. So when Jesus says here, like, and it is a radical thing he's talking about, like when he says, give up your life for my sake, he's saying, give up the way you think it is so you could find the way it really is. And it's important looking at this, like, what's worth more, your soul or everything the world, to gain the whole world and lose your soul. Because you can get, if you look back at like anything you've ever achieved or done, it doesn't leave you any lasting satisfaction or sense of fulfillment or like spirituality. It doesn't matter if you waited forever. Like, I knew a person I was really close with, and I used to try and tell them that, but they'd get the car finally that they wanted forever, or they'd get this procedure done that they wanted forever, or they'd get this thing in their life that they wanted forever. And every time they got it, it was a short-lived pleasure. It was really cool. They thought they had finally found it. And I've done that too many times, so I'm guilty of it as well. And then shortly after, it would be gone. It would be gone. Like Rumi says in his poetry, like, one that's not living in spirit could spend all day in the marketplace collecting money and making deals and bargains and walk home just tired and empty-handed, meaning that their soul and spirit is empty-handed, not fulfilled. And it doesn't mean that, you have to make it clear that it does not mean that you become a recluse from the world or you don't function in it. You function in it just as you would. You live out whatever. And that might mean that you stay and do the same thing that you've always done, or you might do something new, because maybe the only reason you did what you did was out of just ego and pride and striving. Or maybe you stay in that role and you just live it differently and you do the same thing and it looks the same, but on the inside your intention has changed. Where your intention before was, where you're going to get out of this, now your intention is to live in harmony with the universe, and you do your part, because we need all the parts of the whole. We don't just need people in monasteries that meditate and stuff like that. We need that too. And just the fact that people like that exist is very important. It proves a great deal. Like, what are we always trying to do, and what are we striving to get? Like, I've seen people that are they live in those places for their whole lives, and they're just as happy or happier than I am on any given day, which is interesting, because society would tell you, like, don't they have any ambition? Like, aren't they getting stuff done? Shouldn't they be accomplishing something? And they are. The work they do in there is more than the work I could do by running around and trying to ego my way into making things happen for a lifetime. So it's interesting. It's not about what you do. It's about how you do it and the intention behind it. So you could do, like it says, like people say, like, love God and do what you will. So if you can act with love, it doesn't matter where I'm going or what I'm doing. It doesn't matter if I'm an insurance salesman or if I'm an athlete or if I write books. It doesn't, or if I'm a mother and take care of my children. It doesn't matter what you do. It's about the intention and the love that you bring to it, and it's important. Like, it's called Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of action and selfless service. It's important to practice that in everything that I do. So what Karma Yoga is, it actually means, essentially, it could be said, when you do Karma Yoga, you're dedicating the results to God. And what it really means, and what it means by that, is you're doing the work without attachment. So you could be fully immersed in what you're doing, but without concern about the outcome. And that's when it works best. Whether it's teaching a sports class, which is an example from my life, what I do, I'm much more effective in the class when I'm just doing it as a part of the flow, and I'm not worried about what the parents are thinking of me or how the kids like me or how it's going to go. I'm just doing it as a part of the universe to the best of my ability, and what will happen will happen. And that's how you avoid creating new karma, by being the act. So when I'm really, like, if you ever think about it, if you do something you really love, like whatever it is, a sport you really love to play or something you really love to do, when you're doing it and you're really in it, it's almost as if there's no you anymore. There's just the act happening. You're just a part of the whole thing, rather than always being a thinking entity that's doing it, rather than being the doer. So, the path of karma yoga is a really hard one to practice, but it's most relevant for most of us because we do spend our days working and doing and going through life. And when I wasn't practicing it, like when I first got into recovery, when I would go to work, I would just take it as like, okay, I gotta go to work. Some people hate work, or they're bored of work, or they think it's a waste of time, or they see it as a means to an end. If that's how you view it, that's okay. But all of those things are ultimately not the truth. Dogs cut me off. So they're ultimately not the truth of the matter. So if I spend most of my days, right, at work or out there doing stuff. So my fallacy was, before I would be like, okay, work, I got to get through this, and then I can go home and go to my recovery meeting or pray and meditate or read this spiritual book or whatever, which is fine. But I was missing using all of this time when I was working and using this action to deepen my connection to a higher power, to deepen my connection to God. So I realized I could do work on myself in anytime, anywhere, which is hard to stay conscious of that. And I also noticed, if I'm looking at it in like a huge frame of time, it's easier to get caught in it. Whereas if I'm just living this little moment, I just do what I can in this little moment. I just see the truth in somebody else right now. I just drop the anger right now, rather than trying to play it through and thinking of how it was so stupid they did this or did that. I just let it go, because I realize that it's about me and I'm doing the work on myself. And the only way that I could help any other being is by helping myself, because I can only help somebody get as free as I am. So if I'm caught and trapped, I could probably offer a little bit to you, but not very much. Mostly what I'm going to offer you is my fears and my delusions and my anxieties. So, and you can't work on yourself. Like, people talk about being selfish. It's really all one thing, because you can't work on yourself sincerely and not be a benefit to other beings. You can't sincerely help others without helping yourself. So they go in harmony with each other, because if you're really selfish and you're discluding other people and you're all about you, that's really not helping your soul either. Or if you're trying to help people out of a place of, not out of a true place, but out of a place of attachment or greed, or out of a sense of, I should be good, that just shows that we don't have the goodness in us. So anything that I think I should be, or trying to make myself be better than I am, or at a different place than I am, is really just all a fallacy, because you could work as hard as you want to make yourself better. And if it's not the time, it's not the time. So freedom to change comes after acceptance of what I am. So when I could accept what I am and have some awareness, so say you're greedy, and you're a greedy person, and all you think about is yourself. By trying to stop that, by trying to change that, you're just getting caught more in delusion. To change it, I look at the greed and I see that I'm a greedy person and I'm selfish, and I always think about myself. And I get some awareness about that, and I look at it and I smile at it and I say, there it is, okay, there's greed. I don't get angry at myself, I just see it. Same thing with, if you do like watch a bunch of pornography, you try and make yourself stop, you're just defeating the purpose, because you still have that attachment in your mind. And the attachment's what's important, not the outer act. So if you still have the attachment in your mind and you're not doing it anymore, it doesn't matter, because in all purpose and intentions, you're doing the same thing. Whereas it's better to look at the act and observe it, and if it stops, it stops. And if it doesn't stop, you continue to observe and bring some awareness there, and accept it for what it is, and you'll see it become less and less appealing to you. Same thing with anger. If you have extreme anger and hate, you can't make yourself not angry. That's the biggest thing, is like people think that you could use the ego to get out of the ego. And all that thinking is a part of the ego. So if I could reach into soul, I can get some awareness about that anger, and slowly it'll slip away and it'll die down because I'm not so attached to it and I don't get so caught up in it. So, I'll finish with this. It doesn't mean that you can't do work on yourself, but you do the work without attachment to the outcome. And that's when real transformation can occur. So there's a subtle difference between working from the soul and working from the ego. So most of the time we're trying to make ourselves better. And the paradox about that is, if you could, you would already be, wouldn't you? So it's like trying to pull yourself up by your boots. If I could make myself better than I was at this moment, I already would be. So I have to let the process unfold. And most of the time, my work and self-centered striving just keeps me longer away from being where I want to be. Where if I just surrendered and let it be, like I said, give up my own attachments, give up my own way to follow this way, as Jesus said, then it would actually unfold quicker. So everyone's at exactly where they're supposed to be, and you can't rush the process. And even if you think you could rush the process, that's okay, because that's just part of the process too. So it all works interconnected. It's all important, and it's all what you have to go through. So in the end, the path of the heart is about having compassion for myself and others, knowing that there's great love in life, but there's also great suffering. There's a lot of hate and greed and envy, and there's a lot of beauty and joy and the like. It doesn't mean that you're bad because you don't feel good all the time. So feelings and emotions and thoughts are all part of nature, so they come and go and change. And as your individual entity changes, you do lean towards more peaceful thoughts more of the time, and more peaceful mind more of the time. But as it says in the Tao Te Ching, there's a time for being vigorous and a time for being exhausted, a time for being in front and a time for being in head, a time to lead and a time to follow. So there's an ebb and flow in nature. And you can't get mad even if you're depressed. Like, that's okay. That's just a part of the deal. So you go through that process and you get some awareness and you accept it for what it is. So it's important not to assume that you should be in a fixed state all the time, that you should always be happy or something's wrong with you, because that's not how it works. It's more important to develop that awareness and be okay with the way of things, because it's all a part of the game, not just your happiness, but your happiness and your sorrow.